Emerging Technologies for Sustainability. I extend my warm welcome to our esteemed panel members and I invite them on the dais. Our moderator, Mr. Shikhar Jain, Executive Director, CII-ITC Center for Excellence for Sustainable Development, to steer this session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you have last two sessions were inaugural and the last session which was on net zero. And I think taking forward, my colleague just introduced me. I am Shikhar Jain with CII, looking after the Center of Excellence for Sustainable Development. And I have a great panel with me and need to introduce this panel to you as we go into this session which is on emerging technologies for sustainability. And we are seeing this session in the context of not only sustainability, but what as India can provide the solution for not only the local companies, but also for the global outlook. And I think that's why we have, in this panel, we are trying to do two things. And we have a keynote address from Mr. Christian Can von Seelen. He has been the co-chair of our B20 task force on energy, climate change, and resource efficiency. And important to note his contribution as co-chair. So I will request him after I've introduced my panel for a keynote address. And then we go into the panel discussion where we have four panelists. And also I will request some questions from Christian in his capacity, both as a keynote address and also his experience that how the emerging technologies can play an important role in India. We have in our panel Mr. Brijesh Chibbar, who is a partner from McKinsey & Company, and he brings his experience from the EV world, from the future of mobility, and I was interacting with him, the amount of work that he has done in the EV sector. And I learned, Brijesh, that you have a sort of a think tank that you are running within McKinsey on the EV future mobility. So I think it would be great insights for us as the government policies are also getting defined, that how the EV related technology as a part of the emerging technologies for sustainability could be looked into. We have Mr. Vivek Saxena with us, who is the service line leader from Genpact, and I think from the financial accounting thing, and the digital solutions that he has worked into. And I was learning from him and learned that he is also a blogger. So hopefully, what are the technologies from the digital side and how they can play a very important role in the interface for the solutions that the country is looking for. And we see a lot of AI, which is artificial intelligence, and the machine learning integration going on. And I think that's something very, very unique that we will learn from him. We have Mr. Anurag Johari with us, who is the Managing Director with Accenture, looking after the utilities and the renewable business part. And I think he also brings his experience from the utility side, because we are looking into so-called just transition and the net zero pathways. And I think his experience, while I was discussing with him on how do we integrate this complete technology part and the software integration into it, and what we can learn out of it. And I think what we need to look this session as it goes is the solutions part. And I think that's what I'm looking for. And then we have Dr. Rohini with us, and she's the National Technology Officer with Microsoft India. So I think we'll get a whole lot of experience from the Microsoft world. I say that what are the technologies, what are the client-facing solutions that they are developing from the Microsoft perspective. And I think she was giving some example, and we'll learn more that how these technologies could be beneficial for us. But just setting the context, because this is the 18th Sustainability Summit, and we are doing this summit under the so-called theme of strengthening global partnerships for sustainable, equitable, and inclusive development. And I think this session while we are discussing on emerging technologies, I think we need to see that where India has reached now. And I think in the morning I was discussing with somebody when they say that this is the 18th Sustainability Summit. So it's not that sustainability has arrived now. We have been working on it, but now what we are looking is the solutions part. And I think this complete panel is going to give us some insights from their work that how sustainability is mainframed now into the technology part. Earlier, gone are the days when technology was seen or sustainability was seen as a reporting or a disclosure, and we have ESG still, which is there more disclosure focused. But now we are looking sustainability more as integrated into the business model. And the moment it goes into the business model, what are the new innovations we can try for? And again in India as CII, when we interact both during B20 and otherwise, I think world looks at India for some solutions. And if we can provide the world with the sustainability solutions which are test-tried within Indian geography, I think there is a world open for the companies that innovate. And I think we have a lot of solutions which are coming for. And from the government perspective, and that's what I was discussing with Christian over here, that while India has a net zero pathway of 2070, but the private sector is contributing a lot to accelerate the time frame to 2040 to 2050, and how these sustainability solutions can help achieve those. And can we run it across to the government as a part of our policy advocacy and give them some pathways that this is where the technology development has been going on. And you have seen how India is developing its own ecosystem for green hydrogen, for carbon storage technologies, and there might be much more which will be coming. And today we have to learn from this esteemed panel that how do we integrate this complete digital part that India has already taken a lead. And I have the great companies like Microsoft, Genpact, Accenture, and experience from McKinsey, and above all from Christian, who is like a veteran in this field of mobility. So I think this is what, as a context, I would like to say. And let me invite Christian for keynote address. And why this keynote address is important for us is Christian had been with us as a co-chair of the B20 task force. And I think he had participated in capturing almost many comments which came across the world, and we had more than 200 people as the task force members, and reaching to a consensus and then coming out with the recommendations. Of course, those will be released in this week when the B20 summit gets into action. But we thought that we use the privilege of Christian been over here, learn from him that what the core team, as a part of which he was a co-chair and still is, that what had been your experience with B20 task force, and if you can throw some light on that, and of course your experience of this complete exercise on B20. So over to you, Christian.
So, thank you, Shikhar. That happens when you approach the 60, you are called a veteran. Thanks for that. So, welcome, everybody, esteemed panelists, delegates, attendees here. If I address all the topics you mentioned, I'd be standing here for 1 hour. That would not be fair, right? So, I try to keep it short and a little bit focused on let's say, the core deliberations of our task force. My task force, so to say, the task force for energy, climate change, and resource efficiency, of course, has a huge overlap with the question of technology and sustainable technologies contributing to fighting climate change. It is even, I would say, on the one hand side, a philosophical question and a technological question at the same time. On the philosophical side, there is the, let's say, the European and North American scholars, or at least many of them, sitting in their cozy colleges and saying, shouldn't we rather step back and not look into technology as a solution provider anymore, but should we scale down? And I think, of course, there is some truth in this from the Western perspective, that we do have to adjust our lifestyles. But the simple fact that the heavily industrialized nations have, so to say, blown through the decades of CO2 for an entire planet in a few years, cannot mean that the emerging nations can be excluded from improving their lives. And I think specifically with the G20 presidency lying in the hands of India, which is one nation that has really demonstrated that progress comes from education, scientific progress, and development, the answer has to be a clear no. We have to believe in technology. We have to work with technology to further improve and increase our possibilities to counter climate change. I even believe that precisely sustainability in its broadest meaning is the one thing we lacked in the past approach to technology. And if we focus on sustainability in technological development, we can make sure that in the future technological progress contributes in the wider sense really to improving the condition of the planet. And we've seen that happening. Like in technologies like solar cells. When I was studying physics in the 80s, efficiency has improved for the solar cell itself from 15 to far beyond 20%. We have applications with 35% on a laboratory scale. We have multifocal solar cells reaching 50%. The cost per watt output have melted away like ice in the sunshine, so to say, making solar in many regions the cheapest source of electricity. So from the perspective of my task force, if we apply those learning curves to technology relevant in the industries, so what can we learn from that? And I would like to look at three things. Battery electric vehicles, of course, that's my business. Hydrogen, because it's a hot topic, I know. And carbon capture, which is probably the most disputed topic among those. So firstly, let's look at battery electric vehicles. Although, of course, we can optimize the power electronics, the electric motor, etc., the real battle for progress is with the batteries. And currently, we do not see many scale effects. Many are actually disappointed from the scale effects on the battery because the surge in demand around the globe, which is a good thing in itself, has led to scarcity in certain resources and bottlenecks. However, this is being mitigated by two approaches. On the one hand side, new resources are being brought online for raw materials. We see that happening for lithium, for cobalt and others, and we see already prices are coming down and they will continue to come down, create the scale effects we know from other developments in the industry. But I think even more relevant, research money is pouring into alternative concepts, using less or different minerals or rare earth or a completely different approach to setting up the battery with solid state anodes, etc. You know all those topics. Over the last 5 years, battery technology has made more progress than in the 50 years before. And you can believe me, I'm 58. I remember my first battery toys always being out of juice when I wanted to use them. More relevant, last week, for example, CATL has introduced their new generation battery, which can charge 400 kilometers in 10 minutes. And these are the breakthroughs we really need and we will see happening more and more. From my point of view, battery electric vehicles are for the coming 2 decades at least the go-to solution for decarbonizing the passenger car transport sector. 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers and 4-wheelers. Which brings us, of course, to the topic of hydrogen. And we had already some discussions around that. Hydrogen is by some pitched as the universal problem solver of everything in climate change. And arguably, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's one thing which drove me into physics in the 80s. There was a huge institute for hydrogen at the university in Stuttgart where I studied. However, in terms of scalability, generation, distribution, and storage, hydrogen is significantly more challenging than electricity or batteries. More so, there are other industries to carbonize than my home industry, automotive. In steel production, for example, hydrogen plays the key role. It's the most researched, the most effective approach to decarbonize steel production. And also, if you think about the air transportation, the airline industry, hydrogen or hydrogen-based fuels are probably the most realistic approach to decarbonize also air transport on a larger scale. And this is also true for heavy-duty road transport. There, I would say also hydrogen in the short term can play a role. So don't get me wrong, I see a huge learning curve for hydrogen. Direct H2 generation from sunlight, for example, has already reached 12% in efficiency, which is really good. However, again, even if generated, the challenges in storage and distribution are huge. Hydrogen is a sneaky little chap, if you want it that way, very small atoms, very small molecules to be precise, sneaking through every joint you have in every transportation or storage device. Building a hydrogen-based infrastructure on a subcontinent like India will be a huge challenge, much more challenging than improving the power grid. Finally, the third, probably the most controversial topic is carbon capture and storage. It can negatively be viewed as a license to continue polluting, and there is merit to that viewpoint, right? It can also be viewed as probably the only chance we have to battle the surplus which we see coming. It might be the one tipping technology to allow us to keep the 1.5-degree goal. There are currently like 30 large-scale industrial prototypes running around the globe in various geographies from Norway to Patagonia. I think we should watch those, evaluate those carefully without prejudice, and then see what it can contribute to battling climate change on the globe. So bringing that back to my task force, what were our key takeaways for emerging technologies for sustainability? How did we view that? Firstly, education, research, and scientific progress will be key enablers in overcoming the effects of climate change. That is very clear. And bringing that back to India, I have a wonderful colleague, Anila. When we get those presentations from somebody saying India is the country of elephants and snake charmers, she always goes ballistic. Right, snake charmers, I don't need to discuss, but as per Dr. Google, there are 28,000 elephants in India. However, there are 44,000 colleges. There are 4 crore students enrolled in higher education currently. That's half the population of Germany. So if any country is positioned to drive research development in climate change, it is India, without any doubt. And secondly, that was the other ongoing theme in the deliberations of my task force. Of course, technology openness is important. It's a huge factor to keep science going. However, looking at the large transformational and investments required, industry also needs focus. In German, we say you can't drive a different pig through the village every day, meaning you have to stay on 1 or 2 things and then do them properly. Regulators have to create an environment where we in the industry can focus on core technologies per industry. For example, automotive going for battery electric for the next 2 decades. Steel production going for hydrogen for the next 2 decades. Air transport going for hydrogen-based fuels, just to make sure that we can focus our efforts on these solutions which have the highest short-term impact. And at the same time, of course, we need global exchangeability and standards. There are discussions, CBAM on the European side, QCOs on the Indian side, just to name one pretty hot example. We need to achieve specifically in this area of battling climate change, open global standards which can transition from geography from country to country without any impediment. Otherwise, the scarce resources which we have will be overstretched and the transformation objective endangered. At Volkswagen, we are firmly pushing the battery electric bandwagon. Our luxury brands like Audi will be fully electric around the turn of the century, but also our volume brands like Skoda or Volkswagen are strongly pushing for the electric transformation. And not only the vehicles, also the infrastructure, we try to really get it sustainable as much as possible. Just here in India, we have one of the biggest rooftop solar power plants in our plant in Pune. Our plants are certified water neutral, zero waste to landfill, etc. So it is possible, and it's a business case to be sustainable. So lastly, if this topic of focus on core technology per industry, globally compatible regulations and standard, if this is one of the core outcomes of our task force, it will definitely contribute to developing technology for sustainability, and thus I think it will strongly support the motto of this G20 summit, One Earth, One Family, One Future. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian, and I think you have captured very well all the discussions that went through the B20 and the way the technological development is going on. And just to take the conversation ahead, I think I will move to our second panelist, Mr. Brijesh now, because and that the topic would be the same in continuation with the mobility part that Christian just mentioned, and I know that you are a part of this future mobility think tank from McKinsey. So given the growing importance of the battery technology and the EV ecosystem that we are developing within the country, what are your thoughts, Brijesh? And what do you think the way forward is, considering that we have already a roadmap which is defined for EV, both with the two-wheelers, three-wheeler, and the other mobility sort of vehicles that we are looking into, and also very recently, I think last week, there had been an announcement for the EV buses, which will be procured, and a major investment is coming up in the EV technology. So what do you to share your experience, that how do we see this as one of the emerging technology for future mobility?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Shikhar, for a very warm welcome. And first of all, thanks, Christian, for sharing your thoughts. I think I resonate a lot with what you said. Mobility is one of the large sectors in terms of its contribution to carbon emissions, right? So if we were to, baseline, and we did this, piece of work over last year, looking at how India can decarbonize way faster versus 2070, maybe by 2050. And the baselining, showed that mobility contributed close to around 10% of carbon emissions that happen in India. 10% of almost 3.5 gigawatt tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. That's a lot. And probably the third largest emitter after power and agriculture. So an organized sector and a third largest emitter. And the biggest output is the tailpipe emissions, right? So absolutely, that's a very, very important imperative to look at as to how do you abate. And zero emission vehicles, electric vehicles, eventually hydrogen powered vehicles would be solution. Right? But the moment we start to think of electric vehicles, a lot of the frame that has been made successful in countries like China, Europe, US starts to get applied into India, right? And that is where our articulation is that India can leapfrog in a very different dimension, right? Because our vehicle construct is very different, our vehicle architectures are different, our use cases are different. India is dominated by light vehicles, right? Two-wheelers, three-wheelers. Even our commercial vehicles are dominated by light commercial vehicles, small commercial vehicles. Payloads are low, average speeds are low, torque requirements are very different, right? Power requirements are very different. And these use cases, if we start to think from a standpoint or a frame of what we have in developed markets, you will start to over-engineer. You will start to put what probably is not fully optimal for a market like India. And that is where the articulation is that can we create solutions which are best suited for emerging markets, right? India is, for example, having the largest population of two-wheelers and three-wheelers on this planet. And every year we sell the largest number of these vehicles as well, right? And our OEMs here are best placed to engineer solutions which are best suited for applications like these. Right battery architecture, right? Christian talked about CATL having developed battery technology that can charge in 10 minutes and give 400 kilometers. The application of that in India is very little bit far-fetched, right? We have to figure out more cost-efficient battery solutions, right? Battery technology or battery chemistry which is more attuned to less of pinch metals, right? Which are developed through more abundantly available raw materials. Motor technology which is dependent on less use of rare earth metals. And that is where India can leapfrog, also in partnership with countries like India, where such applications will be of great demand. And little bit think of how do we collectively build this. So can we have collaborations on building this technology? Can collaboration on sourcing these raw materials, right? South-South collaboration which helps us build technology, battery cell architectures which are suited for applications like this. A South-South collaboration of sourcing these raw materials, right? Where there is preferential treatment for companies in that consortium. whereby you're able to reduce the upfront cost of acquisition of these vehicles. Those are elements where countries can collaborate. B20, G20 frameworks can be put into place to be able to help South-South collaboration on these fronts. Eventually, Christian also talked about hydrogen. On the extreme end, as we start to think about commercial vehicles, where battery technology probably will not be the way to go zero emission vehicles, and hydrogen potentially could come in. There again are technologies which are being experimented and pushed in more developed markets like fuel cell. But again, our use case in India is way different, right? We don't have 40 tons of goods being hauled by a single truck. We don't have trucks which run 500 kilometers a day, who run more than 100 kilometers per hour. We don't have those use cases in India, right? So maybe fuel cell technology is a bit of an overstretch for a market like India. Can we think of hydrogen-powered internal combustion engines, which is again something that is being experimented? And India can be the technology hub for this technology for emerging markets. And solving for, I know your point, but solving for storage and distribution of hydrogen, can we think of decentralized production using in situ renewable power, or for that matter, experiment with biomass generated hydrogen, right? So a lot of solutions are being experimented. I think that is where, Shikhar, to your point, India can take lead. India can have partnerships with like-minded countries, and we can create those elements which help emerging markets like India to be on this rapid path of decarbonizing mobility, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Brajesh, for those comments. And later when I wrap up, I think I will do focus on that. But we move to Vivek, to you now. In your experience, how can the strategic adoption of data tech, because we have discussed on the mobility side, on the manufacturing, hydrogen, and CCUS and all, but from your experience, from the strategic adoption of data, technology, and AI in business transformation. So what are your views, and how does this enhance in the sustainability practices? And what are the challenges that you are looking from your experience? Because you have done a lot of work in risk and also the hedging of those risks and all. And from your experience from the total financial business models, how do you see this integration of tech adoption, data, and AI coming into the business? What do you, Vivek?
So when I have done many discussions with clients in last 24 months, things have changed in last 6 months. So initial discussions were all with the chief sustainability officer and the sustainability team. But in the last 6 months, many of the discussions have happened with the CFO organization or the finance leadership, who is trying to figure out what they should change if the SEC timelines are coming soon, and if the numbers are going out for submission, how much of audit trail they need to have to really be sure what is going outside has the complete backup. And that's where the point comes on enhancing the control environment as well in that journey. Now, when we think of, we have seen accounting books, we say GAAP books, we have seen tax books, and I think the future is like ESG books, right? Which is why SAP launched Green Book as well, or Green Ledger, I should say. Now, when that journey is coming, I'm an accountant, so I see things from, okay, how I have to figure out, right, when the reporting has to happen, or how the data tech and AI journey will make this journey, disclosures or reporting much faster. Now, the way we say, in terms of zeros and one, there are 4 zeros and 1 which will drive the journey of data, insights, and sustainability reporting. And first zero is zero time to close, which means, right, you are doing a lot of payments, you are doing a lot of expenses which are related to disclosures or scope 3, say, emission norms computation. Now, how will you close the books in time, right, or faster, I should say? Then comes zero time to insight. You have so much of data which is coming not just from the E standpoint, it is coming from S and G standpoint as well. How you will get the data and convert that into insight, that's the zero time to insight. The third part comes, now these two are truly not possible unless you drive automation. So comes the point of technology, right? So whether robotic is enough, or you will have IoT, you will have cloud computing, you will have many of the ERP and micro platforms and data solutions which are coming. Now these three will not happen till the fourth zero is there, which is like how the process exceptions which you have today, because you have not planned for doing ESG reporting in the last so many years. It was not needed, it was not required. Then comes the point, okay, the fourth zero of zero touch or zero exception. Now, these 4 zeros will lead to ultimately one user experience, or I should say customer experience, which is one of the goal from the sustainability reporting as well. Now, these, for us, the way we have been communicating to the client or we are learning from the client is how this journey of sustainability reporting through faster data tech insight will make it real in the timeline when it comes to SEC and other disclosures. I think we heard in the beginning, Mr. Puri was saying the number of standards are so many. Still, there is a need to drive a standardization among those standards or disclosure requirement. And in fact, we did an event last month with under the aegis of CII and B20. And the point was, the learning was same, right, in terms of how some of these should become global, right, in terms of need and reporting. Now, when that is happening, the new buzzword, or I should say the reality of AI will also come into play. Now, for the same journey of data to reporting component needed, I think we are assessing AI impact from 4 aspects, right? For each of these, how much of work is needed for, which is needing for, say, text classification or text conversation or content generation or info search. And that will define how much of it is real when it comes to your ESG data to reporting journey.
Thanks Vivek for this insight. And a good word I learned today, the green ledger part. Obviously the ESG drove this complete dialogue of green capex and green opex, which the accountants have been now asking for. But I think this technology integration that you are bringing in from the point of view of data and the processes and the green ledger part, I think this is good insight. And if we can develop those sort of models within the country and see that how it could be there for the world. We move to Anurag, to you from from Accenture's perspective, the vertical that you lead on utilities and renewable. And again, there is a lot of integration which has to come there of the technology and the smart grids that we are talking of. So just throw some insights that what you think are the real-time actionable emerging solutions we can look into utilities and the renewable sector.
Sure. I think before I go there, maybe I'll reserve that part to the last bit of my answer. But I think, because I think the audience here is much wider. So therefore, I would like to start with a more broader aspect around technology and sustainability. So way back in the year 2014, Accenture Technology Vision prophetically announced, and rightly so, that every business is a digital business. Right, and in 2021, in Davos, we said sustainability is the new digital. Now, what are the implications of these 2 statements, right? In our view, the implication is that digital or technology goes hand in hand with sustainability, right? And as a result, when we talk about technology and when we talk about sustainability together, we are looking at essentially 3 aspects. The first aspect is around sustainability by technology. Essentially meaning that how do we harness technology for the purpose of sustainability. And I think that's something which is very well understood. We recently did a survey of about 560 global organizations with $1 billion annual revenue and more. And what we found was that every organization in that survey rated technology as important or very important when it came to sustainability. The second aspect, which is very important again, and the second lens, is around sustainability at scale. Because most of the global problems, or if you look at SDGs, they cannot be solved in isolation. And that is where you need the technology platforms to come in and support. Now, this is an area where we believe that while there is a growing understanding of what needs to be done, but there is a no-do gap. Essentially, a lot of solutions still need to come. And the third one is interesting. The third one is, while we talk about technology being a solution to sustainability, but can this become a problem in itself? Can the solution become a problem? Because technology also has a carbon footprint, right? So what do we do so that the carbon footprint of technology itself can be reduced. It cannot be eliminated, but can it be reduced, right? And to look at it in a holistic fashion, what we did was we created a sustainability tech index. And what we find is that 60% of the organizations fall between 0.3 to 0.5 of that index, essentially meaning that while people are not sitting idle, they are doing some work. However, that work is still not going to lead to, say, a 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature change, which is what we want to do, right? What we also saw was that if the middle folks who are between 0.3 to 0.5, if they were to move to the upper decile of this group, they could look at almost 21% improvements in key business matrices, such as their ESG scores, such as innovation, such as productivity, such as their profitability. So therefore, the case I am making is that if we look at sustainability and technology together in a holistic manner, there are business benefits and business outcomes that can be quantified, that can be gotten, right? Now coming to renewables, right? Or coming to, the smart grids. I think there are multiple use cases, and we can kind of keep talking about them till the cows come home. But essentially the idea is that if we talk about smart grids, right? The key essential element which comes out of smart grids is the data at minute frequencies, right? How do I use that data for, say, demand side management? How do I use that data for ensuring the right behaviors in people? And I'm glad to report that the government in India is taking note, and there are policy interventions which are coming up, which are taking care of that. So for example, we are talking about time of the day tariffs for the consumers, and what we are trying to do is incentivize people to leverage or use electricity when there are solar hours, because we are mostly solar as we speak today. Similarly, I was reading a news column a day before yesterday. Maharashtra is trying to kind of take their agricultural workload to the solar hours for the farmers. Till today, it is in the night, because that is what is deemed to be a non-peak hour. So, those kind of policy interventions will get streamlined. Those kind of policy interventions will also get enabled through things like smart grid. Now, if you also look at, the renewables, you also brought in the aspect of renewables. Now, if you look at renewables, I think battery technology is deemed to be one of the key enablers, right? Now, when you look at advanced cell chemistries and advanced batteries, the kind of simulations which need to be done, if you leverage today's computing power, it becomes more like an intractable problem or an inoptimal way of solving. But if you bring in quantum computing, that is when things start to change. So as you get into quantum computing and as it becomes more widespread, I believe that the ability to model the right cell chemistries, the ability to bring in the right kind of scenarios for testing out batteries, that is going to improve dramatically, right? And finally, there are certain things which are already happening. So for example, and very mundane things. So for example, the robotics cleaning of solar panels, it saves up to 90% of water and is also making efficiency of the solar panels increase by about 15 to 20%. So on that note, I rest my case. I spoke about a more broader industry as well as utilities here. Happy to answer any questions later.
Thank you, Anurag, for bringing the context of how this integration and trying various solutions which are already to a certain extent scalable, but let's see how we go further on this. We move to Dr. Rohini now, and then just you have heard everybody, all the panelists, but we need to learn from you, from Microsoft India perspective, this complete interconnectiveness between sustainability and the strategies that Microsoft India is employing with the clients in the complete world, and what are the solutions you are offering for them. So over to you, Dr. Rohini.
Thank you. I think the advantage of going in the end, most of the folks have said some very interesting comments. I'll take a view from not just Microsoft India, but from a global perspective along 3 dimensions. One is, what is Microsoft as an organization doing to become more sustainable ourselves? Second is, clearly we work with customers and partners globally. How are we enabling them to create solutions, technology solutions for sustainability? I would argue on that point is that sustainability will require technology at every step. Whether it is data, whether it is IoT, whether it is digital twins, quantum, these are all going to be required. So how are we helping our customers and partners? And third is, how are we working with ecosystems and players in a broader context in terms of sustainability? So first, if I look at our own footprint, we pledged recently to become carbon negative, water positive, zero waste by 2030. And also protect more land than we use in terms of biodiversity. While that is ongoing, the ability for us to use technology to optimize our own operations. So for example, in India, the Bangalore building, we have a digital twin for that building. And we are able to show customers how to use digital twins to optimize energy usage, water usage, etc. That just becomes one way, but ability to, for example, even purchase power from renewable power is another way in which looking at scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. The final one is in terms of building a responsible supply chain, which is good for us, but also helps our customers then indirectly minimize their environmental impact. In terms of using technology ourselves, that is just the first step. The more important aspect becomes when we are able to enable customers. At the end of the day, you're listening to some of the points that Vivek was making earlier. It's a very big data problem. The ability to say that you've met certain targets, you have to then be able to track them, visualize them, report them, be able to determine what worked, what did not work. So it's actually a huge data problem. So the Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability is one attempt to help our customers and partners create standard data standards, being able to bring different sources of data together, be able to create data products on top of them, and therefore have that standardized approach to addressing sustainability. So it's actually a platform for others to develop on. Having said that, there are Microsoft Sustainability Manager, etc., which are there, but I think the bigger issue is, and all of Genpact, Wipro, Accenture, etc., are partners who are developing solutions using the Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability. I think the important part there becomes is, how do you ensure that the data that you captured, you are able to now get insights from it, develop actions from it, the point that you mentioned about 000, time to insight, time to close, time to process, exception. That is where AI comes in. Because today the ability of AI to, the ability to generate insights, the ability to even talk to your data, many new things are happening in the world of AI, which completely changes the equation of how you will think about your data. The last one I would say is in working with the ecosystem. I think I was discussing with Anurag earlier, the whole work of green software is about how do you make technology itself more sustainable. Similarly, there are things that we are doing on something called a planetary computer. It is basically the data of several petabytes of data that's available for academia and researchers to leverage with APIs and experiment and do research on sustainability. Finally, there's a climate innovation fund that is intended to invest in technologies like carbon capture and others to help in terms of developing new solutions. So there's a whole range of activities. I just spoke about the 3 layers of how Microsoft is doing, how we are working with our customers and partners, and how with a broader ecosystem, because this is indeed a planet-sized challenge that no single organization can solve by itself.
Thank you, Rohini, for bringing this insight and seeing the time that we have, because the topic is of great interest to the audience. What we do in the best interest of time is I will request all the panelists to, in my second question, just respond in a minute sort of a time so that we do justice with the session, and the next is also going to be there. From Government of India point of view, and we have 2 activities which are there, which are very important from the policy advocacy point of view. One is the complete PLI scheme that we have been talking of, which is announced by government. Second is that how do we scale those things? And of course, in PLI, one of the key things is that, which is more from the point of view of made in India. So I think that component is what drives it a lot. So my common question with all the panelists is that while we have discussed over here various technologies, both from the carbon capture, from hydrogen, from the battery solutions point of view, and parallelly there are government schemes like National Hydrogen Mission, we have on biofuels, we have the hydrogen mission, then various other missions which are there. And another important part is the interconnectivity of various ministries' work also, the interdependence between the various ministries, because when it comes to the technology part, we have METI and others who are also defining certain rules for Internet of Things and things like this which are happening. So one policy recommendation which I request all my panelists, which can help us a lot from the this session to take it to government from the point of view of either PLI scheme or some ongoing thing where you feel that this policy intervention can help a lot of scalability of this particular thing, but it needs to be actionable, because one thing that has come out even with the B20 part that you have mentioned is that from the scaling point of view, what are the projects in pipeline? I think let's not think too much beyond and start investing in those things which are going to come 10 years hence. But what could be those ideas that can spark this thing, and government can play a major role and get it on board in action mode. So we'll start with you, Christian, from your experience, and then we go along with all the panelists. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So 2 parts to that. One is on you mentioned biofuels, etc. Of course, there is technology openness. E10, E20, E85, those are available technology, and no reason that they should not play a core role in India as well, supplementing the green transportation, the, let's say, CO2 neutral transport. But in the larger scale, I would remain with my point of focus, right? It is very good that we have PLI schemes, for example, supporting the local manufacturing of battery cells. That is important because that technology needs to be in India. We need probably, if you say, a slightly different focus point, rather lithium, iron, phosphate, instead of the very fancy things, because we go, whatever, 35 kilometers is the average speed of a truck in India, I guess, and if I drive through Mumbai, I think most energy goes into the air condition, not in the propulsion. So these things are important. So that focus then needs to be there on various levels. One is the PLI, but the other, for example, is then the QCOs. They are also active mechanisms of the government trying to get core manufacturing technology in the country. And again, that is right, but it needs to be focused rightly. Recently, we were discussing about nuts and bolts, and that's definitely not what is a core technology enabling the industry in the larger scale, right? So there needs to be a good balance, but I see many things running in the right direction.
Thank you. Yeah, Anurag, yeah.
So on the PLI, I would like to talk about the PLI scheme for the PV solar manufacturing. I guess there are 2 things which I recommend the government to do. The first being that, with all these incentives, what you will see is that in another 3 to 5 years, we'll be at 95 gigawatt of production capacity. And today, if you see, most of our exports are only to the US. So we need to expand the markets. and with China running over capacity and China as a state going into Africa and other places, I think we'll need the muscle of the state also to do that. That's one. And secondly, my view is that maybe the PLI scheme will need to give a little bit more time to the manufacturers, because I've been talking to almost all the folks who are actually doing the PLIs, and it seems that the timelines are a little too, a little too stringent for them to meet.
Fine, Brijesh, your views?
Yeah, no, I would echo what Christian said. I think focus is very important, and focus on the right technologies which are relevant for India, which make the case for economic viability of, these technologies from a decarbonization standpoint. I would add to that one, additional thing which industry, government, all the regulators can help with is how do you create win-win partnerships with markets like India, right? Where there is a give and take. We, together develop technology, we access raw material, we are able to, co-create markets. That's going to build scale for countries like India to, decarbonize much faster versus countries do it individually.
Rohini, your suggestion?
I think two things. One is, even as we are going to the local manufacturing, there is a opportunity we have to really rethink manufacturing from a digital first perspective. Because we have the ability to leapfrog. And if we can think about the fact that digital and data will be primarily required to be sustainable and meet the timelines that we are talking about, that is one important element I would take, really think digital first. Second, I do think that certain protocols, et cetera, that are happening in the India stack world, for example, ONDC, to me has a really strong ability to address sustainability. Because fundamentally, it is about hyper-local commerce. It's about being able to find the right buyer-seller combination. And that fundamentally changes in the way in which logistics and commerce needs to happen. So thinking of that from a sustainability angle would be a really interesting way of changing the game in India.
Thank you. Anurag, over to you.
Vivek.
Oh, sorry, Vivek, sorry.
Okay, in my view, when these PLI schemes are going on, they have stated objectives, but we should figure out then, as we were saying that in the morning, Shri Ravi Shankar Prasad quoted many things, and one of that was harmony, bringing it together. And if it is sacred, then it is sustainability. So what kind of commitments we are expecting from the manufacturers who are going into that scheme? What is the cost of it? What is the control they're on, right, that they are actually happening in terms of monitoring and really, seeing that traction or actions are happening?
Thank you. So I think just to wrap up the discussions that we had in this session, I think 2-3 reflections which panelists have given very clearly, and I think I should thank each one of them, and also Christian for bringing in the insight what was discussed in the B20 as well. And I think one key thing that Christian shared is the power of not only youth in India, but the education and the research institutes which we have. And when we are looking for R&D and looking for all the emerging technologies and solutions, I think India from the manpower point of view is an enormous resource which we need to sort of explore and see that what are the right technologies in which we have to synergize that particular activity. So we have to give more research projects in those areas where we feel that this is where the emerging technologies is. So bringing academia more closer to what is the government's PLI scheme and where we are looking from the solutions from the sustainability perspective. Second thing, very clearly what the panelists have brought out also is that sustainability is said now. It's a part of the business model. So it's not only about reporting and digitalizing and looking into the processes, but it has to be a part of your business model right from the thinking part. So when we are seeing totally the EV sector which is emerging, I think those companies which are well established, they might have also be looking into the 2.0 or 3.0 within their businesses, that how sustainability could be integrated both from the value chain perspective and also from the perspective of resources. I think very important thing that came in the discussion also is the alternatives. And I think that's also is very critical for new sustainability solutions, is that whether we need to go more towards circularity, which we are seeing in the other sectors, but also the rare metals, which is becoming a scarce and a geopolitical issue. Can we look for alternatives when we are discussing on sustainability, but the supply chain part and the new raw materials will be very critical. Third important part when it comes to the complete digital integration and how do we sort of spearhead this complete process is that it requires a lot of transparency into the system. And I think that that's what both Vivek and Rohini brought out, is that when they are doing a lot of client-facing work, which is there, it is asking for not only the development of the integration, but I think it will also reflect that how we are doing a proper accounting mechanism. Because I've seen in my experience working on the integrated reporting frameworks and all, some of the raw materials which are coming from far different territories are not reflecting the way they should reflect in the account books. So I think all this data integration will let us know that what is our actual sort of carbon footprint. Also when you integrate the scope 3 part, which is very customer focused and how it goes there. Because a very recent example I was learning from the circularity point of view, when many laptop manufacturers are sort of buying back and taking back to their country for circularity perspective, rather than doing that in India. So I think we have to look into those integration also, that how India could also emerge as a circular economy sort of initiative. So I think these are all the works in progress, but yes, your experience has brought the knowledge to the audience, to us, that what could be discussed further with the government to action these into the government policies, and how fast we can go. And even if not government policy, how fast we can drive this as a private sector. So with this, I thank all the panelists, but we have time for taking 1 or 2 questions from the audience if you have any questions, because I was seeing that we are now entering into the lunch time. So I thought that if we can compromise a bit on the lunch time, and any of you have any questions from the panelists, please introduce yourself, and we can take 1 or 2 questions. So may I request, yeah, we are getting mic to you.
Thank you very much. I'm Venkat Krishnan, Ambassador Sustainability from the ITAM Forum. I take care of IT sustainability. The question is more towards green data centers, and I understand Microsoft had experimented with an undersea submersible cloud facility some time back, but that particularly takes care of emissions to a great extent. What are the plans around this in the near future? Because I think the plan was also towards offshore solar connected to such submersible data centers, which would be more sustainable and reduction in emissions as well. What are your thoughts around this, please?
Okay, over to you. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, so just for people's understanding, what Microsoft had experimented, given populations are near coastal regions, and the fact that people have to be served by data centers, what can be done if we put a data center inside the ocean and be able to serve from? So it was an experiment. I think the broader answer I would give is that it's not one thing. It's a combination of the fact that data centers require energy and cooling, etc. So there are several aspects. One is just technological aspects in terms of the kind of virtualization, etc., which I will not go into. But in terms of sourcing of power, renewable sourcing of power, even future investing in renewable sources that you can invest, incentivize more generation of renewable power. We are building data centers in some of the colder regions of the world, wherein you could both leverage the fact that cooling is easier, but also use the heat from there to cool the cities. So there are some very interesting experiments happening in that space. But it is a large issue that, and including green software, for example, how do we even build software, make green software as part of the way of our software development approach itself. So it's a combination of approaches.
Okay, good to know that. If I could ask one more question as a subset of this, is, the industry witnessed, I mean, I've been in the IT industry for a couple of decades and more. There was a point when the industry witnessed a lot of open source, and given the fact that a lot of panelists have talked about the cost of investment in technology towards sustainability, and given a lot of climate change that is threatening us, can the industry overall, not just India per se, look at open source as an additional means towards bringing down the cost of tech investment towards ESG and sustainability? I mean, the question is open to the entire panel. Thank you.
Well, I don't know. Anurag, you want to throw some light, or Burjesh, you?
I don't think I'm an expert, but I have a view, like all consultants have views on everything. So in my view, and again, I'm qualifying by saying I am not a software developer, but in my view, you go Microsoft, you go open source, or you go whatever. I think what will determine your carbon footprints in terms of the software is how you are using the data, what kind of processing you are using, right? What kind of algorithms you are using. So for example, if you go for a compiled language like C versus an interpreted language like a Python, it could be an order of magnitude higher carbon emissions which you are looking at. So I don't think that carbon emissions per se will be determined only by this. But when you talk about cost, again, now I'm coming to the cost. Again, I would always want to look at things in terms of total cost of ownership versus the upfront cost, right? So, and without context, one may not be able to answer if open source is definitely going to be cheaper or not, right? If you are only talking cost here. Right. So those are my 2 cents, and I'm qualifying again. I'm not an expert on that.
Okay. Anybody else from the audience? Any more questions? Fine. So I think it's okay. Fine. Can we have the mic for you, please?
My name is Kaushal, and I'm responsible for the analytics for Dana India. My question is what OEMs are doing in terms of scope 3 reductions and how the global sourcing decisions are made with that.
Okay. So I will pass that to Christian. Yeah.
I mean, global sourcing is nothing new, right? The industry is doing that since decades, basically. And global sourcing decisions, and that's the difference you're probably looking into, they are more and more based on a more complex value decision, right? There, of course, is sustainability in elements, there are CO2 elements. Specifically for the European OEMs, there's a very strict regulation from the European Union that we have to look into child labor and other non-sustainable practices across the entire value chain. So, we have the OEM, we have the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, etc. We as an OEM are responsible for the entire value chain down to the last supplier somewhere bringing some value there. So the decisions have become more complex, but they are absolutely global. And in the context of our last project, where we invested $1 billion in India in our new vehicle generation, as a result of that, we have also developed probably 35 new companies here who now export to the group in Europe and North America. So give and take, complex topic, but a very strong drive.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of this session. May I request audience to give an applause to our panel members for bringing in insight. And of course, I will pass it on to my colleague for the other announcements, and we are already 10 minutes into the lunch time. So over to you, Shubham. Yeah.
So I kindly request all our distinguished panelists to gather for a group photograph.